MotoGP 23 has hit the biking game community with a bang. Or maybe with more of a minor crater. But after 14 months of lackluster gameplay, it is finally supposed to be a new beginning for the franchise, with multiple fresh features and one area of the game even completely overhauled. But is that enough to impress? Or are we looking at another copycat scenario? Let's find out. And with that, welcome back to Overtake. With MotoGP 23, a familiar face has been added to this year's releases. The premier biking game is not only, usually, highly regarded by the players, but also a pillar of representation for the otherwise sparsely shown motorcycle racing. And while the previous title, MotoGP 22, was largely treading water, fans were excited to see what was possible this year. While of course, the core of the game remains the same every title. MotoGP 23 is the representative of the real-life racing series, with the officially licensed stuff all throughout the game. You can choose to drive single races or make yourself a MotoGP legend by driving a whole season or taking a stroll into the all-improved career, which we will talk about a bit later. While the previous title featured an immaculate 09 mode with some historic content, this time it's all a bit more standard and tame, which I think is a bit of a shame, because it was said 09 mode, which was arguably the best thing about last year's title. Some innovation here would have been nice, but maybe the split screen for multiplayer is a commendable addition in this day and age. In this day and age, consuming the best possible sim racing content is also a must-have. So go ahead and slap a like and a sub on this video and hit the bell so you're well aware whenever we release reviews like this one. But back to MotoGP 23. The playable classes also remained the same, with a Moto 3, Moto 2 and the primary MotoGP, included with all your favorite riders from the real-life series. A race weekend consists of free practice and a quali, with a race at the end. But wait, sprint races have also found their way into MotoGP games this year, and it didn't take 2 years for them to do so. Take notes, whoever feels called out. One thing they also added is some new turf to surf on. The tracks are the same ones from the official MotoGP calendar, but with some additions that have never even seen the real-life stage before. The Sokol International Racetrack in Kazakhstan and India's But International Circuit present the new additions, and both drive pretty neatly, I have to say. Similar to F1 this year, MotoGP 23 have made a first-time effort to present the players with content that is yet to be seen by real MotoGP viewership. There are also more options to customize your rider now and have your own stickers and helmets. Really gives it a more individual touch and pays dividends towards appealing to a younger and unfamiliar crowd, which a lot of this MotoGP does. But enough of the generalities. What did the gameplay evolve to? Especially on the gameplay side, a lot of writers criticized MotoGP 22 for unnecessary changes and lunatic AI at times. The new release went with a cautious approach to fix some of the issues, but not all. Right off the bat, the developer Milestone announced the inclusion of 2 new features which were supposed to change the gameplay of this title extensively. The inclusion of the flag-to-flag rule and mural assists for riding. Starting off with the former, the flag-to-flag rule is basically the introduction of dynamic weather in the MotoGP games. For all of us ignorant four-wheel drivers, here a small explanation. When rain starts to come down on a dry race, the riders all dive in the pits at the same time and change their bikes, as of course a tire change wouldn't really be practical mid-race for bikes. This is signaled by a white flag, thus the flag-to-flag rule. So far, this didn't exist in MotoGP, which meant dry races stayed dry and wet races stayed wet. Now you have the dynamic weather option, if you enable it, of course. This certainly made for a more enjoyable and unpredictable racing experience. Plus, the dive into the pit lane is a sight itself. If for nothing else, dynamic weather adds a layer of authenticity to MotoGP 23 that the game desperately needed, in my opinion, even though it's not a revolution. Not very revolutionized is also the gameplay in general, in my opinion. The bikes largely feel the same from last year, with maybe a bit more control at the front. They are tough to control in battles, and racing is especially tricky, with the pack being ultra tight for at least the first bits of the race. The AI is just as feisty as I remember them to be, and if you're anything like me, you will find yourself in trouble more often than not. But something they added in order to prevent troublemaking is the aforementioned neural assists. Alongside a multitude of other assists which are already in the game, an AI-powered tool that is used to aid the newest players was added to MotoGP 23. It basically helps the rider to whenever disaster is imminent and counteracts the problem, sort of like a lane assist on road cars. If you don't do anything incorrectly, or whatever the computer perceives as incorrect at the time, you will never feel what it does, but go too far and it helps you with things like steering, braking, or balance. I tried this assist a fair bunch because I really wanted to finish a single race without feeling like a complete idiot, and it did help. It feels ultra weird and unusual at first, but you end up getting to grips with it fairly fast. The thing is that it feels unhealthy no matter what. It is sort of similar to all the assists F1 has had over the past couple of years. And in every video about driving assists, we tell you to disable them immediately in order to learn how to properly drive. In MotoGP 23, this is no different, I feel like. While it is completely fine to use these assists for the purpose of not crashing, as soon as you turn them off, you realize you have made no progress towards being a real rider. Milestone has set a big focus on newcomers and casuals this title though, and you feel it with additions like this. This should have been obvious when they even had trailers where young children played the game and loved it. So the addition of neural assists is understandable, but the sober gameplay experience beyond these assists is still better. Other than that, there's not too much new to report in terms of gameplay. You can still adjust your bike to your demand before the race started, with a lot of difficult looking numbers and terms for non-bike enthusiasts. This all pretty much looks like the same from last year to me. If you were clueless before, you will still be in this title. Something I found was that curbs felt a little bit less like ice blocks this time. But beware, they are still dangerous and the feeling on gamepad in general is still lackluster at best. I would have hoped to at least see some intended improvements here, mainly because this is one of the biggest problems of the series. MotoGP 23 did make improvements from its former iteration. That is mainly seen in smaller areas all throughout the game though. For example, the HUD is revamped and looks much better and cleaner. Visually, the game is pretty much unchanged, but one of the most notable improvements is the modeling of the rider itself. The foot movement, for example, when shifting. Now it looks like someone is actually riding the bike opposed to just sitting on it. Up until here, not the big release we envisioned. But so far, we have left out one thing intentionally that is coming up now. Certainly, the biggest leap forward in MotoGP 23 was made in the career mode. Milestone pretty much revamped the way we are able to lead a rider through the ranks of the Moto subdivisions. Starting off in Moto 3, you have to battle your way through the field in order to attract the attention of teams from Moto 2 or even the MotoGP. All throughout the career, there are so-called turning points. Where have I heard an expression like this before? These turning points determine where your journey heads next. Do you miss the win in a crucial race, for example? Then a new goal gets set for you, and the potential reward may need more time. A kind of one door closes, another one opens deal. I perceive these turning points to be impactful in the midterm, but if you stick with it, you will eventually get to the same goal no matter what. Of course, it would take a lot of the fun away if you ended up being kicked out of your own career for not performing. But in my eyes, if you add this feature, make it mean something as well. A cool side fact is that you are now able to drive a full season of Moto 3, something I wanted to do for the last year, for example, but couldn't. The entirety of the career is now a lot more detailed and has elements of management games. Social interactions and development of bikes are just two buzzwords here. The former is kind of a structural network of riders, which helps you understand your relationship you have with them. Talk trash about a team, then you will probably be met with animosity from the riders on track. Relationships can also decide which teams are interested in you and which may back away because you laid a mad roast on their employees. The gameplay of the career is adjustable where it needs to be and stringent where it needs to be as well. It's a good balance and I really appreciated the first hours of gameplay I was able to put into it. Having said that, I can't help but feel MotoGP 23 made no real progress at all from last year. Not with 14 months of dev time. You may feel like a lot of what I've said so far in review is in comparison to the last title, and that's true. Mainly because you don't get the feeling like this is some standalone title, but one of the biggest AAA patches I've ever seen. MotoGP 23 can do a lot of things. You have the most authentic bike racing action with largely the same feeling, the same gameplay, the same groundwork as previously. So if you were a fan of it before, you know exactly what you're getting. If you want to have an in-depth review of the multiplayer, you can leave a comment down below and we'll be sure to make it a reality. And if you are curious as to what Rennsport is doing at the moment, my dear colleague Joe has recently visited their summit with some exciting news. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, cheerio.